Preface. To highlight a potential legislative risk regarding advancing diagnostic definitions in the DSM-5, paralleled with a substantial increase in rates of afflicted individuals suffering mental illness. Since Facebook's inception in 2004, I foresee mass endocrinological coercion leading to group psychoses. The appeal to authority fallacy can facilitate large-scale gaslighting of the population to forego the refusal of treatment based on any individual's ability to choose for themselves because they cannot know or make a decision that is in their best interest. And because of this, the state and or healthcare practitioners can and will use force to ascertain compliance with treatment. The most common treatment for psychosis as a symptom is a spectrum of old and new antipsychotic drugs. Older antipsychotic drugs such as risperidone or Invega Sustenna harbor strange side effects such as in risperidone, gynecomastia, the development of breasts, and in both drugs, alogia, decreased libido, and asocial behaviors such as self-inflicted isolation from social groups. Gynecomastia aside, these other side effects have been for years written off as negative symptoms of the mental illness they aim to treat. I believe that inherent in this is an expression of the hubristic confirmation bias that we see in many research weak journalism outposts reflected in our own healthcare practice and ultimately academia. The newer antipsychotic drugs such as aripiprazole, Abilify, and olanzapine, while doing the trick of medicating lapses of positive symptoms of psychosis, have some highly detrimental side effects of their own. Relating to this is the class action lawsuit posed against Abilify by consumers of the medication who had developed an insatiable problem gambling addiction, which, upon ceasing treatment with Abilify, stopped gambling. And in my case, both of these medications have elicited pathological gambling behavior in me, so I cannot take them on a set schedule, but rather PRN or as needed. Dopamine is the accepted active player in psychotic episodes in an endocrinological sense, but one could argue that more far-reaching psychological malady is depression and anxiety, and in particular social anxiety. Benzodiazepines, for example, lorazepam, also known as Ativan, are fast-acting anxiety inhibitors, and because of this, they can be habit-forming quite quickly. Oftentimes, antidepressants or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, are prescribed in lieu of benzodiazepines. That's to mitigate the habit forming. This seems tangential to the question of mass-scale compos mentis, or the lack thereof, but bear with me. SSRIs, if administered to someone with bipolar disorder, also known as manic depression, elicit manic episodes in these people. Recently, the DSM-5 has done away with the mood disorder label, and that was in favor of a new descriptor, energy level disorder, with hyperdepressive on the low energy extreme, the low energy extreme, and the high energy hypermanic in the contrasting extreme of this spectrum. This is important to note as I bring our attention to the legacy media. In the comments section of Jordan B. Peterson's YouTube video on Bill C-16, and compelled speech, I coined the term serotonin chicken, a game the legacy media seems to have been dabbling in since before the rise of the internet. If you watch the veteran anchors of any given legacy news outlet, you will see a subtle smile or facade of happiness that does little to disguise the look in their eyes, which seemed to me a look of utter defeat, hopelessness, a look of desperation that screams, just end it all, let me die. This has serotonergic intervention written all over it, and rightly so, as it has ever been their job to relay the worst possible news story at any given present tense, and to wrap it up in their broadcast with something on the positive end, i.e. a cute animal or child to elicit an oxytocinergic response, or a joke from which the humor presented can elicit a serotonergic response to send the narrative towards the hypermanic end of this scale, as to bring it home. Those who study charisma may recognize this as the push-pull approach or technique. But those who study and apply in regards to charisma disregard is the risk of utilizing these tactics. I can think of many comedians who, through their career, have developed some form of depression. In the case of Robin Williams, the suicidal thoughts and behaviors that tend to accompany depression took his life from him. There is, however, another affliction pertaining to a career laced with emotional manipulation concerning higher levels of stress response. Cortisol is the active player, endocrinologically speaking, in regards to stress, and serotonin can, by proxy, play a parallel role too. It's time to rip off the bandage. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, originally coined as shell shock from the battles of the last century, is induced by accelerated levels of stress, causing in the autonomic nervous system activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which speeds up the heart rate and respiration and slows down or stops digestion and urination to prepare the body for a fight or flight response, which, if stress levels do not subside, cannot be mediated by the parasympathetic nervous system. When homeostasis becomes available, because an inability to slow down becomes reinforced synaptically. If your digestion becomes impaired, then a hormone called intrinsic factor cannot be released into your stomach to bind with the B12 found in proteins we get from milk, eggs, meat, etc., which is wholly necessary for absorption in the intestines to generate blood and DNA in the bones. This is because the body's immune system reacts by releasing enzymes that, as we learned in my addictions video, prune or clean up the receptors which signal the need for the release of intrinsic factor. I want to take this time to speak about anandamide, a neurotransmitter which binds with cannabinoid receptors in the brain, and yes, it is found in marijuana. To keep my narrative succinct, I will define anandamide endocrinologically as the active player in forgetfulness. Please forgive me for not delving into its utility in false flag media tactics. For now, sufferers of PTSD have been noted as benefiting from the ability to forget, as in it is highly beneficial not to relive again and again the past traumas that inhibit the cool down of the sympathetic nervous system, effectually allowing the parasympathetic nervous system to allow the body's digestive and urine functions to resume. Are the legacy media suffering in this way? Or are they? It would seem that the deceptive facade and fake smiles coupled with the defensive slander of competing principled opposition to their skewed, disorganized, and oft apocalyptic take on current events could in fact point to this. Let's go to the focal point of this article: legislative approach towards the mentally ill. At what point can we feasibly diagnose that an individual's capacity for decision-making is impaired and they no longer can decide for themselves whether treatment is necessary, and therefore we as a society grant healthcare practitioners and the state the use of force to treat the individual? I can't answer this question, but I certainly welcome, opinions and, conclusions of your own down in the comment section below. I can, however, abstract more questions from this one and would like to pose this one, followed with mental health statistics before and after 2004, the year Facebook was conceived. At what point do we allow for change in the definition of general sanity or the mental coherence of the majority? Let's take a look at the statistics. Now, I'm no statistician, so I encourage you to look for discrepancies in this by checking my citation down below in the links I have provided in the description there. In 1999, patients with a diagnosis of mental illness spent 1.5 million days in hospital collectively. In the 2003-2004 statistic, that is the year Facebook went online, patients with a diagnosis of mental illness spent 5.8 million days in hospital. Contrast this with the years 2016 and 2017, that's the most recent census that's been done, and the number of hospital days spent by patients diagnosed with mental illness is 9.9 million hospital days. Statistics like these can ebb and flow with major events, but it is no understatement to say that this upward trend seems to be at the highest in recorded history. Included in the description is a link to Professor George Szmuckler's speech on how mental health law discriminates against people with mental illness. I suggest you take a look at it before you fall beneath the threshold of general sanity, or rather, the mental coherence of the majority. If you want to support my channel and you can't afford to purchase my merchandise, then please like and share this video to your social media account. Hail Satan!